I always say that the best thing about consulting are the people that you work with. You're always working with the best, pushing each other to learn more, do more, be more, and go even further. Which is why I'm very excited to be able to go through these conversations with some of our alumni who've gone on to even greater success beyond their consulting career, and learn from them about the high points, the low points, the achievements, the wins, and the lessons that we can all take and apply in our future journeys. Fares Akkad, Regional Director for Middle East and Africa for Meta. Welcome to Unscripted.
Thank you for having me.
We've done a few of these, not many yet, but every time we sit with somebody, we're always looking at the possibilities of the conversation, given the journey, and you certainly have a very interesting one. And I think a recurring theme is these journeys that we go on, whether they all started or all have a chapter that was in the firm at some point, but then they all go off in many different directions. So to start with, looking back at your journey, how deliberate was it versus accidental?
How much luck? Yeah.
Is it luck? Is it design? Is it planning? What was it?
I mean, I've always had an interest in this field. Like, I've always had an interest in media, and I've always had an interest in technology, because they both, I felt, had an underlying impact on people's life on a daily basis. Like, they're very relevant, and that was very intriguing to me. I mean, would you say it's deliberate? I think I put the intent, and when you're curious about something, you lean towards it. But I would be lying if I say I kind of mapped out my career and that's how it worked. Lucky for me is that media and tech have kind of converged in many ways to the point where they practically overlap, and so that brought my two worlds together. And also, this overlap has brought a lot more of an analytical need to the industry, which didn't exist before. Especially in media, it was much more of a kind of a gut feel and relationships, and gradually, as it shifted towards tech, became more analytical. It overlapped a little bit with my background, which is a lot of it I learned in the firm. I attribute Booz at the time, for bringing me back to the region, to be fair. I mean, I was settled in the US, and if it wasn't for an opportunity like what Booz gave me, I probably wouldn't have explored coming back. And two, I think the rigor of analytical thinking, structured thinking, and storytelling is incredible. Like, I'm always amazed, especially when I worked in TV, for people who do content for living. When it came to business storytelling, they were very weak. It's too emotional, non-pragmatic, non-actionable, and so that has been of massive help. To be able to tell a story in a persuasive way, I think goes a long way. Whether you're trying to sell a startup or build a case for your region, or trying to persuade leadership or a board of a certain project, investment, etc.
So if I look back on your journey, it went through many phases. There was something in LA, you came back to the region, you have startups in it, you have institutional in it, you have consulting, you have operations, you were on one side of the media divide and then switched to the digital side. Were there particular sort of moments where when you were at NBC, for example, was it you were seeing where things were going and said, okay, I need to make sure that I go to the other side because I'm sort of losing the momentum here, or I want to be on where the growth is? And I'm asking this because we're in a situation now, and we'll get to it, where technology is again potentially having a really great impact and even more accelerated. And there's a lot of people who are wondering, what do I do with my career? What do I do with my skills? So before we talk about them, what drove your thinking to decide to make the moves, and how could you then apply it to somebody today?
When I was with NBC, I was always also, I think, on the digital side of the house. So I interacted a lot with most of the main platforms, whether it's Google, Netflix, Meta, at the time Facebook, etc. And so I could see the evolution and where they were heading. But more than anything, anecdotally, I observe how people are consuming this stuff, and it starts from the people, not just the youth, which is a great indicator of where the future is heading, but also more established users when my mom starts using Shahid and not watching TV, and everyone starts getting their news from social media, you start seeing this relevance that to me is super important. We trade in attention span. And when you see the attention span being spent more and more on these platforms, then you recognize that something's happening. Usually, if you're in the industry, that will happen before it affects the ad money or the subscription money. These conversations will follow these trends. Some switched on CEOs will start saying, I don't know, usually it's like, my son is doing this, we're not on these platforms, let's explore them. And then with the lack of very accurate reporting in the region, that might lag even a bit more. But anybody who switched on and kind of sees the trends that are happening in the West, where there's more transparency, and looks at kind of the very numerical and actual reporting that happens on digital, you could see this picture coming together. Initially, I definitely was more interested in the digital side of the house than the traditional. And what I could see also, because the traditional paid the bills, there was always this friction in a traditional media company that the digital was never going to grow fast enough in a dynamic way like the digital companies to compete. I think now, most traditional companies in media have made that existential decision that we're going to put everything on this. But before then, there was always like, it's secondary, we give it second window, we don't have to prioritize the investment, whereas digital was moving very aggressively to capture that money. And then, once you hit that J curve, it's too late. There's enough people, even from a career perspective. When I moved, they were looking for people with TV media background because there was nobody else that did ads for digital. Now there are people in the market that do digital ads. So I don't have to go find a traditional TV person. I find someone who's been doing this maybe for competition. We have a lot of people poaching us from new digital companies. And so I think that's why it's important to get it at the influx, even though you might not think your skill set is relevant. You'd be surprised what they need and doesn't exist in the market.
And similarly, when you made the switch, the geographic switch from LA to the Middle East, what was the thinking there?
Well, that's a bit more, I think, personal because I am from the region. And I was doing fine in LA, and I worked in consulting, but focusing on the media sector in the mecca of the media in the world. But I knew that I could be unique here. I figured the region was up and coming. Back then, it had less maybe of the challenges it's having now in some areas, and maybe some of the less exciting stuff also. Saudi hadn't happened in the way it has. But at the time, the main incentive was, at the age I was and kind of with my background, I felt if I'm ever going to give the region a chance, this was the time. Mm-hmm. And the plan was to come for 2 years and see how it works. And it's always been a lingering thought in my mind until Booz gave me the opportunity to maybe not have to sacrifice the rigor and professionalism that I enjoyed in the West, be able to experience it here, but feel a bit more unique. Having someone who's had the privilege to operate at Western standards with an understanding of the culture, I felt is a good combination. And coincidentally, that was kind of like the Booz formula. They brought, I remember the first dinner I had in the US, because I, by the way, coincidentally signed Booz US initially. Mm-hmm. I wasn't planning to. I had a BCG offer and Booz, and I was joining initially BCG, and then I met coincidentally with Joe at the time, Joe Sadi, and he happened to be in the US, and I joined a dinner where I had a bunch of people who had some link to the region. Either their parents worked for Aramco or they're originally, and the pitch was like exactly this, like it resonated with me. Like, you guys can be just another consultant here, or you can be a unique in the region, and you should give it a shot, and talked about all the exciting things that were happening. And I mean, didn't mention the rigor that came with it, but to be fair, I think, once you've done that for a couple of years, also it prepares you for for anything.
It's we always say it's a school,
Yes.
no matter where you end up going. And there was also a jump into the startup world.
Yeah.
What was the thinking there? So with Glambox?
There was a Glambox and there was another startup in the US. So as a result of, I've always been curious about startup. Like it's still a passion. Even now, I'm either an investor, I'm an advisor. There's something really empowering about taking an idea to an actual business and then seeing its impact on society, right? Like, I feel a lot of pride, obviously, when I see, like we walk now and I see the devices of Meta, but it's ultimately a huge company, massive team, a lot of people came up with ideas, etc. I think when it's something small that you've built, you've decided on the specs, you've decided on the business model, you've decided how to market it, and then you get some sort of product market fit. Like you find that you're solving a problem, is a very empowering feeling and highly educational because, Glambox was myself and a bunch of other consultants from Booth that started. It's a makeup company that was started by 4 guys. There's a lot of things that it shouldn't have worked, but because of the rigor and the dynamism of the people involved, I think the humility we surrounded ourselves with the right kind of talent. And at the time, it was just the beginning of the ecosystem here. In retrospect, we felt at the time it took us a long time to raise money, etc. Now, in retrospect, it didn't take us that much time to raise money, and we raised 3 rounds, which is unheard of, and then we managed to exit, which is also quite an accomplishment. So, I think the idea that the region needs so many things, and in some cases, ideally, yes, we should innovate, but we're at such an infancy stage that we don't even need to innovate. We just need to replicate and localize. And that's what we did a little, with Glambox. And it worked. And I think there's so many of these ideas that we see today that work. The key, which goes back to why 4 guys were able to launch a makeup company, is execution. And I think the region doesn't lack ideas, but people who are able to execute in this region are few.
Clearly, there's a passion for entrepreneurship, and it's part of your character. And yet, you're no longer at the stage where you're in startups. You're a member of many, as you said, you support a lot of startups as an investor or a board member. Is that the way that is that how you still manage to sort of satisfy the entrepreneurial side of you? Is that a giving back aspect?
No, I mean, it's all of it. I mean, giving back, in many cases, obviously, I have a serious interest, financial and operate, but it does scratch that itch that I might not be able to scratch in my day-to-day.
So if we're going to look ahead, because you've been in Meta for a while, I'm sure there's a lot more to do, but if you're looking ahead where Fares wants to be, do you see an entrepreneurial?
Look, there could be. It could be. I mean, you never kind of write it off. Which form it takes, I don't know. It'll depend on the dynamics. There could be. I think there could be also a space where an investment fund with I would say heavy operational presence, because I really do think that's the Achilles heel in the region. There's a lot of brilliant ideas, but how do you execute and kind of keep the rigor, drive growth? And that stuff probably I learned from Meta a lot. How the product teams operate, the speed at which they move, the ambition in which they set growth targets, is something that at the beginning, it took me a while to get my head around, but truly is quite remarkable. Like, I don't think very few companies around the world operate in this matrix hive mentality where, you just kind of set a goal and everybody moves concurrently in a chaotic yet coordinated fashion to get it done. I think once you get that used to that, it's the only way to operate, I think, in tech, to be able to move so quickly and not have a bottleneck, allow for different opinions, for diversity of creativity. If I can bring that into the region, whether in one company or throughout multiple companies, that could be a very good thing for the region, and I think a very interesting thing for me.
Ticks the boxes.
Yes.
Combines all those different parts of your journey into one. Oh, I guess we'll stay posted.
Yes,
on that.
we'll keep you posted.
So you also, as part of your journey and as part of where you are, you sort of have this privileged view of being part of a global tech giant, but also that one that's been fundamental to how digital, especially in the world of advertising and also how we interact with social media, been a key instigator of change. So how do you see, I know, obviously Meta is a big player, but how do you see your personal role in terms of the impact that has happened to the region and to how we as a society interact with social media and now with new technologies coming?
I've always believed that we might not be in a position to generate innovative technology because of the maybe lack of some of the infrastructure and some of the academic depth. But we are always leading in adoption of technology. Arabic is the second language after English on our platforms. We get double the global average of video consumption. Messaging, out of the top 10 cities in the world, we have probably 4 in the top 10 in terms of engagement. We are quick adopters of technology and quick localizers of solutions. So I'm always amazed by how quickly we're able to find something and come up with creative ways to solve a problem. So acting a little bit as an embassy for Meta in the region and an embassy for the region within Meta has been a huge part of what I pride myself in doing. Whether it's making sure the region is reflected positively, getting execs to come and tour. They're always coming with some preconceived notions, to a lot of preconceived notions, and they always leave positively impressed. I have never had an exec come and not be kind of blown away by the positivity, by the ambition, by the friendliness. If I can help drive influence on product design, or even, we always say we're in the business of small business. Most of our revenue comes from torso and long tail, small laundry, grocery shops, etc. Those people have never had a chance to advertise. And so when we run these campaigns, programs at scale, it really revolutionizes how people use the platform. And every once in a while, we try to pick examples to showcase them. But whether it's a Facebook group in Libya where widows prepare home-cooked meals and are able to sell them, or that doctor in Lebanon that used the Quest devices to calm kids during anesthesia, or the housewives of Egypt, which is a very big group. Now there's a TV show that's going to be based on it that basically allows women to share and consult about issues they can't discuss with anyone else. This NGO that uses Syrian refugee women to provide Arabic lessons using Messenger. All innovative ideas that we had nothing to do with, but through providing the platform, through providing trainings, we were able to, these people use these things to make a living. Even when we're very heavily criticized, or if we make a mistake or whatever, whenever I engage with people personally and I say, given everything, would you rather have the platform or not have the platform? 100% of the time they say have the platform, especially in this region. I mean, maybe in other parts of the world they might have different view, but in this region, 100%. It's democratized content sharing, it's democratized point of view, it allows people to communicate. Of course, some people will try to abuse it, but I think in the grand scheme of things, it's such a minor percentage given all that what we need in the region.
You mentioned something before in terms of sort of we don't innovate, or we're more prone to sort of replicating and accelerating development of things that happen elsewhere. Do you think that's still the case with what's going on with AI? We've seen with the investments that Abu Dhabi and Saudi are making. Is that giving us an opportunity? And where does a Fares who is representing Meta, where does the Fares play a role in this?
I think it's very exciting what's happening. I think what the region has right now, especially the Gulf, is there is a window where Europe is in trouble. The US is also not doing great. The world is in a somewhat of a recession, and oil prices are high, and there's this ambitious project from the Gulf. So there could be an inflection point. We had our chief AI scientist in town, and he was blown away. I mean, he was like, I've never seen, he was mainly in the UAE, but I've never seen a country so focused on this in such a structured and positive way. There isn't a debate about the demise of humanity and AI taking over, etc. There's a minister of AI who's progressive and kind of open to suggestions. There are investments, etc. To be pragmatic, there's a lot of talk of AI, but there's very few companies doing real AI work. There's a lot of companies doing work that leverages AI. And I think we will have companies that do work that leverages AI, but to do the deep work, it requires deep academic institutions, which we don't have. It also requires very solid infrastructure in terms of data processing, data centers, cooling systems. So some things will fit, some things won't, but I definitely think those funds that are coming out and the unconfused, unpoliticized direction from leadership sets this country apart.
Akkad is a celebrated media family. You have a great history in terms of media. You've also seen the transition that's happened to media from traditional to digital, and now you're seeing sort of the impact of AI. You have young children.
Yes.
How old are your kids?
5 and 7.
5 and 7. So if one of your kids says, Dad, I want to get into media, are you going to tell them, yes, this is a good idea right now with what's going on, or are you going to tell them something else, and what would that be?
My son is already making these videos, and he says, follow me on social media. He doesn't have a channel, he's too young. But I think, look, the definition of what media is has changed. You know, when they say, I want to get into media, I assume they're talking about digital media. They don't know any other media. So is media relevant? Yes. It will be. It's the way we communicate. It's the way we amplify our voice. Since the beginning of time, humans have needed this platform to be able to communicate. That's not going to change. Will it shift? Absolutely. I think by the time they're of age, my guess is, you know, we won't have mobile phones. We'll be communicating through some sort of wearable. The blend of digital and physical will be seamless. And so those creative aspects that are essential for media will be also some sort of technical understanding will be also essential. So yes, as a concept, I've always been fascinated by media, and to your point, I've seen it shift in terms of medium, but in terms of impact, it's always been the case. You know, let's say you want to do a coup, the script is, you know, you take but then you take the main thing you take is the communication and the national broadcaster. We face a lot of pressure everywhere because everybody wants to control what exists on our platform. And we've had to come to great lengths to say, you know, we have an oversight board and we have policies and procedures and community standards that we publish and we revise, so everybody has transparency, because we evolved faster than regulation, but our impact is still as essential as always, because it's shifted from traditional media, the attention span shifted from traditional media to digital platforms, that responsibility shifted, but the skill sets to monitor and censor are not the same. So whoever is able to do that, I think, has a fantastic opportunity to work, and whoever is able to create and have this reach on our platforms also stands a fantastic opportunity to be very impactful and make a lot of money. You know, today the dynamic of, you know, people don't follow labels, they follow individuals, have empowered actors more than studios. People follow songs, not an album. So the dynamics have shifted, but the creativity of creating a song, the creativity of creating a clip is still the same. So I would, yes, long answer to say I would encourage them, but I would like them also to have the technical foundation because that's needed in the new era.
Over the weekend, I was in an art session with my family, my kids. My kids are also young. And we spent 2 hours painting something under instruction of a lady who's an artist. And at the end, because we were chatting to her and we were talking about AI, and at the end I said, she had us paint an astronaut in clouds holding a balloon. So then at the end, I took up my smartphone and I took out an AI app and I typed a few words and I said, look, this is the AI's version of what we just spent 2 hours doing. And she looked at it, she goes, yeah, but you didn't do it. And it struck me as, from where she's coming from,
yes.
This is her definition of creativity. Her definition of creativity is, I've spent 2 hours doing something, therefore it is creative. Your kids, my kids, their definition of creativity is, have I been able to use the tools at my disposal to create what I want to create and communicate it? So I'm curious, you would still push them in a creative direction?
Again, what I'm saying, I agree with your definition of creativity. I think what she's describing is you didn't have the traditional skills to draw.
Yeah.
I don't think that's creative. I think there are techniques to be able to draw. Most people, my son doesn't have great handwriting. I don't have great handwriting. And my wife, she's always kind of like, oh, yeah. I'm like, by the time he's of age, he'll probably never have to write. Seriously, like whether he's typing or probably not even typing, like audio commands or, telepathy. It's a cool skill. I mean, you can say, look, I enjoy writing on papyrus paper or stoning the thing. It's a hobby, but it's supposed to be a functional skill. And if at the end of the day I'm looking for that astronaut, then I would focus on teaching him the most efficient way to develop that astronaut. Not simply because it's more efficient, it's because it's going to be in more demand. It's not going to be, can you draw one astronaut? Just like we do now with our AI generation. It's like, can you draw 15 instances of this astronaut so I can have a dynamic ad that fits the need of different audiences? To do that manually is going to be completely impractical, almost impossible. Whereas with AI, you're able to generate that. So the skill set shifts. So how creative you are in, should the astronaut be tall, should be short, should be blue, that's still up to you. How you generate it is a whole different skill set. That's why I'm saying I want them to be creative, but there needs to be a foundational technical skill. And so instead of going to art school, learning how to hold a pencil, dividing the page and drawing every circle, you need to figure out how to contextualize the backdrop and then kind of paint your vision. And so I think you did it, you just do different skill sets.
So I also saw somebody the other day trying to explain what skills we need to get and what skills we need to give to our children. And they were talking about it in the context of AI, but it also reminded me of the speech that the principal gave when my kids started school, which would have been sort of 8 years ago. So 8 years ago, the principal in my school said, by the time these kids graduate, it'll be the year 2020, whatever. Nothing that is happening today, given the pace of change, nothing that we take as the norm today will be the case at that time. So actually what they need to be good at is learning. And this person said the same thing, but they said it because they saw what AI is doing. So in a way, things are changing, but they haven't really changed that much in the sense that we need to be adaptable because of the pace of change. Is that something that you specifically try to instill in your children?
100%. I think for me, like I chose an education system for the kids that really focuses on building confidence, like building character. My daughter at 5, she has a presentation every week. Because the question that always gets asked, will AI replace jobs? What kind of skill sets? I think people who know AI will replace people who don't know AI before AI replaces people who jobs. And the reason being, people who know AI means people who are just adaptable, right? And I feel it, like someone not to pick on that art teacher, but probably she was born with the talent. She developed it for over years. It's a huge investment to just say, this skill is not needed anymore. Anything that is binary will be replaced by AI. If there's right and wrong, it can be replaced by AI. So that leaves you in effectively the judgment call space, which is the creative space. So whether you're if you're a lawyer, could be replaced by it. If you're a judge, less so. If you're an accountant, replaced by AI. If you're a doctor, it could be replaced by AI. But the things that AI doesn't do, and it probably, when Jan was here, asked him this question himself, he's like, where we are today is not even at the brain of a cat in terms of AI development. So the idea that, it's going to have a conscience and all that stuff, we're far away from it. But what it can do really, really well is make a lot of predictable decisions very, very fast. So any function that does that needs to start thinking of how can I take this and use it? How can I take my investment in my skill set and use it towards AI, leverage that creative aspect of it. But everything else, will become redundant.
Switching tack a little bit, you're involved in a lot of charity work. What's driving that?
So some of it, for instance, I had a nephew who had autism. Jad, my sister, had 3 boys. Her middle child, at a year and a half, started showing some symptoms of kind of regression. And when they're a young child, you don't feel it so much because the margin is very small. But as they grow older, that margin widens. When it came time to go to school, she tried to get him into school. She applied to 22 schools and got rejected in the UAE, which is supposed to be very progressive. And so she decided, you know what, I'm going to start my own school. And she started her own school, especially for kids with mild autism, as in they're not severe, because autism can get to points where kids can't move and can't speak, but mild enough where she can, over time, with special attention, bridge that gap and feed them back into the normal system. I mean, for our family, this was something that personally impacted us, but then as soon as you put it out, you realize that it affects a lot of people. Actually, a lot of GCC families have this issue, and normally these kids are completely marginalized. They're ignored, they're locked, because they don't know what to do with them. So when you see that impact, you personally get touched and involved, and so that's something that I'm quite passionate about. Not just autism, but people with disability being given the opportunity to live normal life, because usually people look at people with disability and kind of put them under a whole blanket of you cannot. The other thing that I think many of us, I'm Syrian, and I've done a lot of work with the refugee camps. I've been fortunate enough to be born in a certain family, etc., but this could have happened to anybody. And I've seen level of despair in these camps that it's not about fair or not fair, but you say, if I'm in that situation, I just don't know where to even begin. I can't leave, I can't education. I've met with these girls that one of them almost got a perfect score in her baccalaureate, which is unheard of, right? She can't go to university. She can't join the Jordanian system. She can't. She's just gonna basically sit with the idea of what could have been. It's heartbreaking. You feel helplessness, guilt, but also you feel, as a region, this is such wasted talent, and anything you can do. We did, as Meta, we launched a program for them to be able to do online digital skills, so they can at least have these remote jobs. Whether they can do programming, or they can do like the Arabic over messenger stuff. You try to help as much as you can. I mean, I think the region has such a plethora of these challenges that, you know, pick any one of them. And to be honest, it's so rewarding because it means so much to them, but it makes you realize how privileged you are, and at least count your blessings. Because we live in Dubai. We sometimes get lost in this life we live, and it's one of the most rewarding things you can do, I find.
And is this appreciation of the privilege you have versus what could have been, and that's driving you to help others? Did this come from upbringing? Did this come from life experiences? Where did this come from? And how do you, now that your kids are growing up in a privileged environment, because you're going to do the best you can for them, how do you make sure they also?
They have to see it. I mean, it starts from, like, I don't think, when I was at the camp, and I remember I told the guys from UNHCR, this could have been, easily could have been me. Like, there's no reason why I feel there's a chip on my shoulder at all in this. So I think that relatability, I mean, this girl scored higher than I did in the baccalaureate, for sure. And everything equal, she should have better opportunities. So I think it starts from that, maybe a fear of, if I was in that position, I'd want someone to do something for me. And then the unexpected reward is this uncomparable sense of satisfaction that you get when you do something like this. And you get why people who work in NGOs and stuff, I mean, the pay is not great, but there's this sense of real peace of mind that you're doing something, you're leaving a legacy.
Absolutely. And I think it comes more to you when you have kids and you start
Yes.
thinking about. You've also lived in many countries, across, I think, 4 continents, if I'm
Yes.
not mistaken. How have all these different life experiences shaped who you are today?
It gives you different perspectives. You kind of understand people a little bit better, makes you very relatable. So I think 2 things usually make you very relatable to people. If you're able to speak to them in their language, and food. So I'm also very adventurous with what I eat. Because I think if like 1 million people eat it, you can eat it. And food usually tells like the story of a culture, history, geography, but it makes it very, very relatable. Like our new COO is Spanish. I lived in Spain for 6 years. When we first met, he came to the World Cup final. I was like, oh, I used to go skiing here when I lived in Spain. He's Spanish. And he's like, oh, that's my village. You know, so the bond is incredible, like immediately, right? And this happens all the time. I think if you're able to, it's relatable, people open up, it makes it easier to form friendships. You don't need to push, force an engagement. And then the things that you find ridiculous is like sometimes, even amongst the region, we have these like, oh, we are this and we are that. And when you have this perspective from the outside where they look at us all the same, you just find it so ridiculous. Like you find it so funny and trivial that you're able to calmly cruise over it. So yeah, I think it's if I had the advantage of my dad was ambassador and it wasn't like it was part of our life. But absolutely recommend anybody who has the opportunity, like take your kids, live somewhere for a couple of years, come back, it'll give them a lifetime experience. So
I guess that explains why you do a lot of traveling with and without them.
Yes, it opens up your horizons. They learn how other people live. They get new appreciation for different cultures. You get ideas. It's that by far my favorite thing to do. Any
particular food experiences that were unexpectedly shocking or surprising?
I was just in Nigeria last week, and I had Nigerian snails. They're not escargot. They are big, rubbery snails that they put a lot of sauce on them. Good. And then when I was in Japan, it's just a different world. Like what they eat, how they function. It's one of my favorite countries, but everything, the pride they take in everything they do, like everything has to be perfect. Like we went, my wife and I, to one of those places like has 6 seats, and we were traveling with someone from the region. He's, you know, typical, he's like, why don't you expand and open second floor? And he's like, no, it's like 6 seats, I need to, he makes every piece himself.
Many of our alumni, when I talk to them, their paths, especially the ones that come, you know, a lot of them are from the region. They end up going to different countries like you, working in different places, interact with different cultures, coming back. And it's not really anything, like you said, that you could have sat down and predicted. So if I were sitting now with sort of 18-year-old Fares and asking 18-year-old Fares or 15-year-old Fares, where do you think you'll be a few decades from now? How far would it have been versus where you find yourself today?
Oof.
Or how close?
I mean, on the personal side, I think I was late a bit getting married and having kids and stuff, but that's consulting didn't help. But I think overall, to be honest, I didn't expect I would come back to the region. And I am so glad I did, because it's really been one of the big transformational things. You know, people always say like, pursue your passion, and I don't know if that's 100% true. There's the famous quote, Scott Galloway, who's this marketing professor, he says, people who say that are usually billionaires, who made their money doing something very, very unpassionate. Which I think it has to be an overlap between what you like, have an honest look at yourself, and also evaluate what you're good at and what your values are, and try to find that sweet spot. I wasn't thinking about kids, but I think now, like in retrospect, I'm glad that they're being raised here, or at least in the region. I'm glad that I managed to be in a place where I'm able to have some impact, right? If I was in the US, I'd just be another person. And I'm glad it's by luck, by hook or crook, I'm in a relevant, exciting industry. You know, I put a lot of time into my work, and I put a lot of time, not just in the office, but outside the office, and it becomes like a lifestyle. It's very difficult to do that for something that you don't feel moved by. So it's not that I just pursued my passion, but I managed to find my passion in what I'm doing, and that sweet spot worked out.
What are you most proud of what you've achieved so far?
My kids. No, I'm always very touched when people come and say, I read this, or I saw you in this, and I felt motivated. It doesn't dawn on me, because I still think I'm still at the beginning of I'm probably not at this point, but it's if you're able to provide any sort of inspiration, I think is nice. Which is why I say my kids, I think my kids, they're still young, but they still look at me like I can do anything, and that's at least you hope to sustain as much as possible.
And what are you most looking forward to still achieving?
I think there's maybe another entrepreneurial venture in my path, one or two, where I'm not just on the investment side, but something that I kind of personally get in. And I think now, with my network and my know-how, etc., I think it could be hopefully a bit more impactful.
Fares Akkad, good luck in your journey, and thank you very much for
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.